Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
All right. POI through, just unmute yourself. I'm not going to check the chat box. Just call me by whatever, preferably just by the roll. All right. Minum dulu bentar, gugup.
Minum champagne.
All right, minum champagne. Hal ram, astagfirullah. Okay, I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. All right. We think that it's totally not sensible for everyone to critique AOC based on one single red carpet appearance, despite her consistencies in trying to achieve the socialism goal. We're going to defend what the policy did as a, that we're going to say that the message that the AOC delivers is correct, and we also say that every single thing that AOC has done, even until now, is already, proven to be very effective in trying to, realize the socialism goal within the setting of democratic countries in the United States. And we think that it's very, it's just a foolish, especially for the leftists, to criticize AOC just because they think that it's not the most, radical or the most bombastic, gesture that AOC can do. Okay, so we're going to say that number one, we're going to say that the message that the AOC delivers is correct, number one, and we also think it's the most sensible, so the most reasonable strategy for AOC as a part of socialism politicians in order to realize the welfare state that the all of the socialism socialism ever dreams of. Okay, so right now here's the things. AOC attendance in Met Gala gives a very clear message to the hip and wealthy people that attend the Met Gala. Look, here a working class member of society that in the past did not have anything at all, who did not have any political power, but then currently able to enter and also join the party and rub shoulders with the some of the most powerful members of the society in the United States. And secondly, we also say that AOC, the thing that the AOC did is not simply just by attending there and simply, being pretty and also, wearing the dress with that, with the writing of tax the rich, but she already provided a very significant legislative changes within the United States. A very few examples of the legislative changes that the AOC helped promoting is number one, the support to the infrastructure bills, and also a very big support given to the middle class of the American people, to the one who are the most vulnerable member of the society. It provides services and also assistance to the children. It gives assistance for a school credit. It also gives assistance to the pregnant mothers and also job protection to so many member of the society in the United States. And this is a very worthy social goal that every socialism wants to achieve. And that's precisely the reason why the message that the AOC delivers at Met Gala, tax the rich, is already correct, because the only way for us to be able to achieve that goal is just by taxing the rich. And this has already happened to some extent currently. And what we want, what the AOC want, is just to make it bigger in scale. And that's why we think that the message is already correct, and we need people to actually understand that in order to achieve that, we need a more aggressive wealth distribution, and the only way for us to do that is by taxing the rich. Now, and not only that, we are not talking about how we are going to achieve the welfare state, but we also have to remember that AOC also supporting the Voting Rights Act, which the goal is actually to protecting the voting rights, especially for people of color, from the Republican entrapment. It ensuring that the people have their constitutional rights of voting to be protected from the malicious intent from the Republican to prevent them from having their voices to be heard under the democratic setting. All of these are very positive contribution coming from AOC. And it's simply foolish for us to antagonize AOC simply by one appearance in red carpet. And now let's talk about the left-wing attack, right? Because most of the critics coming from the left wing, they said that AOC is AOC is just hypocrite because how come we can create a significant or meaningful or a revolutionary changes if we rub shoulders with the rich, especially at the event like Met Gala. But we're going to talk to you about why this is actually a very sensible strategy for us to push Democratic Party to the left in order to achieve social democracy in the United States. As I already mentioned before, that the AOC is actually a very big proponent of bills that will eventually create a social welfare policies that was very minimum, and also now with the AOC supports, now we have an even better and also a wider support for the social welfare policies. Now, we regret the antagonization of AOC because we think that all of those policies that AOC support is very good and also very meaningful and provide values for the society. But secondly, we also think that the way that AOC strategizes is actually the most feasible way for you to achieve the social democracy with meaningful social democracy in the United States. Why? Let's analyze what the leftist has done so far in order to achieve their goal. As leftists have several strategies, right? But the strategies have several issues. So number one, the issues with the leftists is that the elite politics is so powerful that they are very hostile towards socialism. Remember 2018 or what happened to Bernie Sanders, when Bernie Sanders seems to be very powerful and people love Bernie Sanders, but still within the Democratic Party, he actually got shot down and never really become Democratic candidates for presidencies. And then secondly is that the number of people who genuinely interested in socialism is very few. So meaning that we don't really have any significant effort support from the general public of United States to support the socialism. So what we need to do is that as a socialism, we need to understand our position that is that we generally do not have that big of a support. So the best strategy for us is actually to attach ourselves to the bigger, to the bigger group, and in this case, is a liberal movement. So we think that if it means that we have to attend, events such as like Met Gala, but the trade-off is that we will be able to to deliver our message and also to even extend our influences to the wider part of society. We are perfectly happy for that, as long as that we are going to have more capital and also political power in order to achieve our goal. And for that, I rest my case.
All right, I thank the Prime Minister for that fine speech. To open the case of opening opposition, I'd like to invite the Leader of Opposition.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. Setting up my timer. Okay. I'm going to off POI through chat, please. Okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. There are 2 mistakes from the Prime Minister's speech. Number one, that they assume that purchase of material is directly going to be targeted to activism. I think that's an unfair context for this debate. I think this debate needs to talk about a lot of extremely wealthy and material purchases that is not related to activism, just like what AOC did in the Met Gala. We are talking about auctions in like luxurious museums. We are talking about a lot of leftists and socialists, self-proclaimed communists buying NFTs and Bitcoins and also cryptocurrencies just for the sake of like enriching themselves. But also we are talking about a lot of like people that buy obscure scene of paintings for the sake of aesthetic. I think that we need to constantly antagonize this type of individuals. But second of all, the prime minister did not tell you the difference. What is the tipping point between like extremely trivial and material things that they want to like protect in their side versus the type of stuff that people need for their livelihood that brings comfort to your life. I think that is the very important point that we need to explain in this debate, right? So on OO, we're going to point out that these actions are not in line with socialist behavior and point out that buying trivial and capitalist material things are unethical, that a socialist or a self-proclaimed communist should not and refrain from buying. Because even if you say that this ice cream came from organic like farm that is like friendly to farmers, all of the supply chain and all of the capitalist system is actually already unethical. And because we are living in that circumstances, all socialists and communists should refrain from the action on that until we have reached the utopia of leftism that we will we aspire to have and achieve, right? So I'm going to bring a very important distinction and note that this is an exclusive contribution from OO, is that what is an indulgence in extremely trivial and material things? There are two tipping points that differentiate it. Number one is for survivability, of course, but second of all, reasonable level of comfort. So if I choose to buy a keyboard for my work, that is not like trivial stuff that I buy, but I buy it because of my own comfort, so I don't get carpal tunnel syndrome for my hands, for example. So we are okay with leftists living in a comfortable apartment and buying bedsheet and pillow so you feel comfort and go to work, but we don't like buy obscure painting from NFT for aesthetic, or going to auction, or going to Met Gala with thousands of dollar dresses, because we think that is simply unnecessary and that is just for simply extremely trivial and material things, right? So, no thank you. What is expected behavior that we want to achieve here on OO? There are three things. Number one, we want people to self-evaluate and minimize the spending. We want them to gradually minimize it because we understand that some people might need process, and we are okay with that as it's like that's the result of our antagonization. But we want them to feel guilty inside of their heart every time they eat fine dining or omakase in Japanese restaurant, for example. We want socialists and communists to refrain from doing such action because it's unethical and that is an act of betrayal and treating our ideology. But second behavior that we expect is that we want these people to become an example to inspire other people, because most likely those people that we are talking about are public figures or leaders or opinionated person in social medias. So we want like other people to replicate that behavior of not of refraining. But third of all, we are also okay with people considering their political leaning or spectrum of said person, because leftism can exist in a spectrum. So they can be like communists, they can be socialists, they can be like social democrats. So we think that if they still want to purchase those things, maybe it's time for them to stop claiming that they are socialists, but rather thinking, oh, maybe I'm a them, right? So what we don't want to have is that people keep on being hypocrites, saying that they are socialists or communists, but keep on indulging themselves, fully knowing in their rationality that this is wrong. This is because of the blood of the labor on my comrades, right? So we don't like those things. Now, one response to Prime Minister's speech, she said that this is going to criticize the work that AOC did. No. We can disregard this argument at all, because criticizing the choice of outfit that AOC did in Met Gala does not mean we are delegitimizing her work in parliament and in like politics, right? We are not discrediting her work. What we are doing is pointing out that your personal choices or like political choices to go to Met Gala is something that is not going in line with the strategy of activism that you declare and you pander the group like the leftist people into, right? And this is exactly counterproductive, because now more individuals will take the path of performative activism, ignoring the protests outside of the Met Gala, for example. Now, going to my first argument, I'm going to talk about how this change of behavior to minimize their spending is going to work. Why? Because for the peoples that claim themselves to be socialists, it's important to have constant reminder of all of unethical purchases that they have made, because they will need to stop the act of denial for the socialists to have a justification, right? Because somewhere inside of their heart, they understand that this is wrong, but they keep on doing it, right? That's why we want them to practice self-control, because these are mostly people that are influential, so we don't want them to set a wrong example, right? But also we are talking about how these individuals should have this guilty feeling when they are going to make and commit the purchases, because they understand that this stuffs and trivial things that they are making is contributing to the capitalist market and supply and demand system. They're just propping up the system that they hate so much, while at the same time they're campaigning, they're writing Facebook posts like 10 paragraphs about why socialism is the best system, why capitalism is going to be so bad, but at the same time they're just enjoying it. They're just consciously propping up the system. They're just being complicit to the system. Now, going to the second thing about political spectrum clarity, we need to realize that being socialist and communist means that you are militant. You believe in, like, let's say, no private property at all. You realize the importance of like to each according to their need. We think that it's important for these people to self-evaluate if they are really like, they really want to have and purchase and own this type of material and trivial things. Maybe it's time to reconsidering, right? And this is going to be much better on leftism movement. Why? Because there's a better discussion about political spectrum, that now that we call them out, we can talk about how maybe it's also good to become socialist Democrats, and we can be an ally, for example. But we think that the first step is to call them out and bring this to a discussion, and don't just let them just feel the guilty pleasure every time they make the purchase. That's why we're very proud to oppose this debate.
All right, I'd like to thank the Leader of Opposition for that fine speech. To continue the case of opening government, I would like to invite the Deputy Prime Minister.
Testing, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. So okay. No preferred pronouns. If you'd like to POI me, just sorry, just do it through chat or interrupt me. No problem. Both is okay. Okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Opening opposition argues that they shouldn't listen to Akita at all, because this is not a criticism of of AOC's work, but this is a criticism of AOC's behavior in that regard. However, what they missed from Akita's speech is that this is part of her work. And the reason why this is part of her work is because the campaign to tax the rich, the merry message that she is doing is in order to achieve what she wants in her work. Okay, without taxing the rich, without giving that message to the rich, you cannot logically have her work workable. Okay, if you do not tax the rich, then there is no way you can finance an infrastructure plan. There is no way you can do no way you can do the pass the Voting Rights Act. There is no way you can do the Green New Deal. Now they say, well, why couldn't we do just more material things? But why is that the parameter, right? If this is good and this one way for you for campaigning, then it's morally acceptable. There is nothing morally wrong about that. And we say that in order for that kind of strategy is actually why a lot of Champagne Socialists do their job. This is not because of they enjoy immaterial things just for the sake of immaterial things, even though I'm going to defend that as well. It's not just because they enjoy that, but because they want to make a point, which is what happens in AOC's case, which is why we should be careful to antagonize these individuals, because we have complex motivations, and a lot of these motivations sometimes do have personal benefit for it, and And sometimes it also have public benefits for it. And in that case, it's better for us as leftists to adopt a strategy of respecting everybody's approaches and see whether that improves the situation of socialists themselves. So they say, for example, let's reflect, and maybe people have different ideas about social democracy. Thank you very much, guys, for declaring that I am not a socialist just because I'm a social democrat. Screw you. Anyway, the point here is that when socialism is so weak, having this kind of stupid criticism on behavior of individuals is actually a material impediment on what they want to create a change in society, which is they want to create policies or they want to substantially revamp the state in order to do so. Because if you insult AOC, it's likely that she's not happy with you, right? She's not going to support you. She's not going to be very strongly for you. And this is indeed one big problem with leftism. A lot of leftists believe that because this is a moral idea, even though I'm abusive to my allies, even though I say cruel things to my allies, I will still need to support the socialist ideas because, well, this is morally the right thing to do. Yes, it's morally the right thing to do because I don't like my allies. I'm not going to work with them. And therefore, the strategy of antagonizing AOC, even we accept the entirety of the premises of the opening opposition, is still completely unacceptable because you are needlessly antagonizing your allies towards because of trivial things. I'm going to say, moreover, moving on to my argument, is that this kind of trivializing the ally, of insulting their allies is also unproductive because this is wrong, even wrong socialist principle. Okay, why do they say the case? When Marx won a communism, Marx won a communist utopia. That communist utopia is a society in which everybody is living in so much abundance, you don't even have to work. You can be a poet in the morning, you can be a fisherman in the evening, and you can be a critic in the night. And in order to do so, you have to create a society of abundance. Therefore, Champagne Socialism actually points towards the future, in that we want even the working class to have the right for luxury things. Okay, that luxury things should not be just for people like me, but people who do not have money. In our current status quo, that good things should not only happen to rich white people, but also to previously poor brown women like AOC. And this is very important because the lessons of the policies of austerity and the policies of austere living that opening opposition have been doing is something that is extremely uninspiring, because then the working class see that under capitalism, at least you have some chance to be rich. But if you work with socialists, at best you become people like in Mao's propaganda video. Okay, people who live with wear uniforms all the time, who live in toil all the time, and supposed to be happy about it because I'm just contributing to my society. This is actually completely unattractive to a vast majority of population in the United States, especially, and a lot of part in the world. And moreover, we see that that vision is not competitive, and we have strong evidence that that position is not competitive. Why? Because that is the vision that Mao offered. That's the vision that Stalin offered. And the reason why, one big reason why the USSR failed, and one reason why China finally abandons that vision and goes to try to create prosperity for the Chinese people, is that then the people who live under socialism look at capitalism and see that people have much higher standard of living, and they go with that system, members of the House. So this trivial changes actually is important, and actually it's important for us to show that socialism can also support this luxurious life for people, because we need to command the allegiance of people who do not support socialism in the first place, rather than having some inspirational nonsense about we need to suffer forever and in eternity living just with poor and low quality clothing. So therefore, it is consistent with the idea of Marx as well, and it is far more competitive compared to the idea that's being brought forward that we have to be very austere and we have to abandon these ideas. Okay, so this is something that is very important for these individuals. Finally, I'm going to go back to the notion of purity politics that is going to supported by this regard. Socialists are popular when we are talking about policies that actually improve the life of the vast majority of society. The vast majority of society actually do not watch Met Gala. The vast majority of society actually do not give a crap about what Kim Kardashian or Lil Nas X wears. When socialists spend time talking about the Met Gala, they themselves look very stupid and foolish. They themselves look like they are just like Twitter denizens who are focused about what is the outrage of the day. And this does not grow socialism. And this alienates the working class anyway. So what the opening government wants is not this kind of approach of criticizing comrades for trivial things. Rather, we need to focus on policies. AOCs have great policies that we have to support and that we must support. And in this case, demonizing this approach over the Met Gala is the absolute most foolish idea that socialists can ever do in their life. Thank you very much.
Right, I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for the fine speech. To continue the case of opening opposition, I'd like to invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition.
Check. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, give me 1 minute, please. Okay. Preferred method of receiving POI is via chat. So please do not unmute yourselves. And then, and then no preferred gender pronouns. So you can call me anything you want. And I think that's that. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I'm going to do 4 things in my speech. 1, I'm going to do a slight clarification about what this motion actually means, because OG seemed to define Champagne Socialism as AOC going to Met Gala. Number 2, I'm going to talk about, is this principally consistent with what the ideal idea of socialism is, engaging to a vast majority of OG's argument, because OG really focuses that much on that. Thirdly, I'm going to talk about a clearer delineation between different levels of leftism and how this is able to help our movement. A pragmatic argument that Jessica brought, never responded at all by opening government. Lastly, I'm going to talk about the pressure to change the behavior of these Champagne Socialists themselves. Why is that going to be beneficial? So first, let's talk about clarification. So okay, I have flagged out that this debate is not only about AOC going to Met Gala, and I think that's quite obvious already. But let's just engage to their context, right? They claim that sometimes people's work is within the framework of Champagne Socialism. We don't think so. We don't think that criticisms towards the work that you do per se can be not separated with the idea of the fact that it is doing things that are extremely trivial. Like, for example, if you take a look at Winston Churchill, like, he is a very, very great defender of fascism, right? He defends democracy all across the world, but one of the ways in which he do that is that he is very racist to Indian people because he do not care about his colonies, for example. We are able to celebrate, okay, what he does to defend the world against fascism is good, but his way to do discrimination against Indians is highly regrettable. So it's not a binary like what opening government said. Okay, so like, don't buy that context. I have clarified this earlier. Secondly, let's talk about principle consistency, engaging to opening government's vast majority of argument. I have 4 layers to say here. 1, opening government claims that we should reflect the idea of communist utopia. But note that we do not live in a post-scarcity universe, ladies and gentlemen. In most cases, people are not able to be able to experience all of these things. And in Marxist movement, there needs to be a prioritization. Okay, like, for example, Marxist envisions that we must be a stateless society, but before that, we must have a state first. And the same thing applies here. If you do not have the capacity to indulge in luxury first, you should not engage in luxury. But in our current moment, we are not at that stage yet. So I don't think that argument quite makes sense. So that's the first layer. Second layer is that the context behind these Champagne Socialism is the idea of moral entitlement, which creates biases towards people. So here's how it works. if you do significantly moral good things, oftentimes there is this bias that you have done good things, which makes you entitled to do bad things. Like this is also scientifically proven. A lot of people who eats healthy and vegan, for example, feel that they are entitled to go to like travel via wasteful planes and so on and so forth. Okay, and this is the context of champagne socialism here, which in aggregate does not do any benefit to the principal consistency of socialism at all. Number three, the idea of socialism is that from which according to their ability and to each according to their needs. Jessica has defined to you what is ability and what is needs, and obviously this goes beyond what is needed by the society, therefore it is not principally consistent. Lastly, the idea of this is being mass informatism. I think this is quite obvious. These four layers goes on to show that their argument about principal argument, I think this is intellectual exciting, but everybody to call. Okay, so that's the first idea. Third question, let's talk about clearer delineation between different levels of leftism. I'm going to talk about how movement building will work here. So the problem that we have right now with the leftist movement is that people oftentimes find it hard to distinguish what is leftism actually is. Because by nature, leftism tries to correct the moral wrong of the world. We try to position ourselves in a higher moral authority. The problem is, to what extent do you position yourself in a higher moral authority is different from leftist to leftist, where, for example, social democrats, such as myself, who agrees that capitalism is good, but also agrees that there needs to be a sufficient safety net for those who are not capable to survive in the capitalism yet. There is socialists or like communists, like I don't know who these people in this chamber, probably there's someone, like who believe that private property should be completely abolished, dictatorship of the proletariat should be completely existent. Oftentimes people find it hard to differentiate all of these things, and this is caused by the right wing to misrepresent our campaigns, ladies and gentlemen. All of the leftists is burdened to defend communism while that is not actually the case. And that is the thing that we are going to dispel under our side of the house, because by the time we point out that, dude, you are a hypocrite, you do not label yourself as socialism because you are not socialist in the first place. That is the time in which people are able to engage in a more nuanced discussion about who they actually are. For example, AOC and Bernie Sanders are like very rich people, okay? But people are now able to discuss, okay, she goes to Met Gala, she indulges in rich things, but she does good things for the leftist movement as well. So who is she? Probably a social democrat. And that's the time in which people are able to understand what our movement actually is. And this will lead to three benefits. Number one, the biggest campaign towards the right-wing movement towards ourselves that says that we are fundamentally hypocrite is going to be completely abolished. This is very beneficial for those at the middle gray area who do not think that leftism is something that is important. It's something that is morally consistent. Second, our movement will be appealing to more people, okay? In a sense that a lot of people agrees that the poor should be defended. However, like we should not go to full communism. Like these are the kinds of people that we will appeal to under our side of the house. Thirdly, even if we talk about those who are principally very, very militant, they will still go to our side as well. Because do note that people already recognizes that left is currently attacking current left because of no reason at all. Right now, there is a broad class level solidarity in which like many leftist movements, according to different specific policies, they unite under a united front against like the evil that is like the Republican Party in the US or like the Conservative Party in the United Kingdom or whatever. People recognizes the urgency that we have right now. Therefore, the leftist unity and increased people of leftism happens better under our side of the house. So, sorry. So those are the third question. Lastly, then let's talk about pressure to change people's behavior. So what we told you under our side is the idea that these champagne socialists will be pressured to undergo less of their indulgences. So how does it work? Is that oftentimes these champagne socialists are people with high profiles, right? We are talking about celebrities, politicians. Like, for example, if I'm not mistaken, Nicki Minaj or like that one rapper meets with Bernie Sanders, for example, right? So like when we pressure them, we are able to tell them that, no, you should not engage to these people, to these indulgences at all, which brings two benefits. One, their fans do not engage in much spending that are indulgent as well. They do less performative activism, they do more concrete actions. And secondly, scale-wise, like it's going to be quite beneficial for their immediate surroundings, right? Like when you have like several thousand spending that is very massive less, that means that society in the immediate term will going to be better. We are so proud to close the case of closing opposition. Let's go to Momojas.
Thank you, government member, for that fine speech. To open the case of closing opposition, I would like to invite the member of
Hey, sorry, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Thanks. Okay. Yeah, there is no preferred gender pronouns. If you have any PR, you can do so through chat. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Closing opposition is an ordinary person stuck in the middle of armchair philosopher. I may not be as smart as the others who talk about sophisticated idea about identity, but we will talk about the needs of the people, which is the essence of socialism, right? We have socialism because we care about the welfare of the people. We have socialism because we hate capitalism and want to create real changes. So that would be the identity of closing opposition. We will talk about how do we create real changes, how champagne socialism is damaging our current progress right now. Because all of the theories that is talked by the opening debates and to some extent closing government as well, all these theories only exist to create a better life, right? So if closing opposition can prove to you a better life, we win this debate. But okay, let's kick out opening government from this debate because I think they're just being the PR of AOC, which I don't think is a very strategic move. We don't care if AOC is a champagne socialist or not. We care about should we condemn champagne socialism or not, right? That's a debate. Opening opposition talks about this sophisticated idea about, controlling people to evaluate yourself. Am I a socialist or not? We do not care about that as well, okay? If your action damage the movement, that will be the most important thing in this debate. But because, the benefit of opening opposition is just very weak, right? Okay, I'm not going to eat yukaku for the rest of my life, but if the majority of the people still go to capitalism, then it's just going to be a very weak punch to the capitalism. And we don't think that it's going to create real changes. But yeah, one piece of important setup, we basically agree with opening opposition on how we're going to imagine this world will look like. Our role model here is Noam Chomsky, who decided to not join practical politics because he understood that once you join the system, you're going to be poisoned by champagne socialism. He doesn't engage with any companies. He stays true to his values, and he doesn't look like a Mao video propaganda. He lives a very good life as well. He has a house, he has a car that is very necessary for his life. So no, it doesn't look like the Mao video propaganda, and I think that's possible, right? So yeah, I'm going to talk about several things here. First, I'm going to understand what is socialist agenda and why is it so hard to achieve them. Second, understanding what is necessary to fulfill those agenda. Let's talk about the first thing, right? Well, we are basically asking for welfare for the people, free housing, medicine, other basic needs. What does it need? A massive amount of resources, exactly like what Satria said. That's why it is so hard for you to advance socialist agenda, because one, you need a lot of tax to fund all these resources. Second, you also curb the growth of companies through regulations, because inherently, if they get more money, that means they're taking those money from the people, right? Both of them harm the upper middle class who control the majority of government as well as the economy. CG's government about being nice to rich people, asking them to be our knight in white horse is just useless, right? Because it does not matter how good you are to them. If your proposal massively inconveniences them, if your proposal takes away their jazz, their yacht, and their seventh house, being kind and good is not going to work because they are so habituated into this luxurious life. They will not want to give it up for you, an ordinary farmer from West Java, for example, or from the US states, right? So that's why we don't think it will work. What we need to do is a massive movement. We have to convince a lot of people to denounce all of this champagne socialism and ask for real changes. If it's about revolution, we are also willing to do it, right? Maybe in the future, that's outside of this debate. But what we want is a people who are so united, they can take away anything. They can fight the government, for example. That is the utopia that we have here. And we think that's the only viable solution, because any soft changes will not even work, because capitalism and people's goods are just so entrenched in the system. So let's talk about the second thing, understanding what is necessary to fulfill socialist agenda. There are several things here. First is definitely unity. We think that you're going to create a privileged ideal by the capitalism standard, of a socialist, right? Oh, we think the socialist person should be able to hold a civil discussion while drinking a champagne with your, pinky fingers upright, right? Meanwhile, many people who are oppressed by the capitalism have so much grievances. We're talking about people whose land is taken away forcibly by companies who are much stronger than them. We're talking about people whose job is taken away by the companies simply because they are no longer relevant and they do not have any value to the people. And then champagne socialists will look down on them and say, you're violent, you know, that's why people don't like you. You need to amass to them, you need to be like me, you need to work out, you need to study a lot of things in order to hold civil discussion, and then we're going to have a solution. But this will create a huge fracture where community fight against each other because they don't see eye to eye, right? Because the Champagne Socialists think I am the ideal version of a leftist community. Meanwhile, the people who have real grievances also say that we are also the leftists, right? Government team may say, then don't antagonize them. We will not fight if we don't antagonize them. But the fight will be much bigger, right? Because if there is an elite community constantly invalidating you, then you will inherently fight because you want to protect your experiences. But now, at the very least, people will not say that, you know, they are a Champagne socialist, right? And this will hamper down the difference of the opinion. Secondly, is creating opinion fracture. What is the ideal way to fight? The ideal way to fight is not by discussing all these things, but actually doing an action. You can evaluate, you can strategize once you know what is the best. Once you do an action, right, you can just improve it in the future. But if you're stuck in the planning of what we should do, then even if Mars revive, we won't do anything, right? That's why opinion fracture is freezing and harmful, and it paralyzes you. But isn't opinions difference always exist? Yes, but most of them are about values, not about how to. Now we're discussing how to tackle down capitalism. And if you're stuck in that discussion, then we're not going to move on, right? So this is our benefit. We will focus more on alternative, the most important thing in this debate. People don't hate socialism because it's evil. It's not hard to convince people to join socialism, but they don't like it because they think it's not viable. If we stop fighting among ourselves, we can direct our attention towards alternative, for example, like Scandinavian countries, why the Cuba doesn't work, why China is very successful, for example. Going to talk about those things, but that we will only have the mental capacity to do so if we stop fighting among ourselves. Secondly, is we can get the right message out. We want to prevent people to be AOC, actually. We want to prevent people to be the Champagne Socialists because one, it is heavily uninspiring. You're having someone who do not have the same experience as you talking about the grievances of the people while she's sipping a champagne on a private yacht. That's not very convincing, isn't it? It shows you that there's loss of hope. Secondly, their policy is not going to be very representative. You're going to be the face of the masses, and gaining masses is very important. That's why it is very important for you to show that you are actually fighting for what the people believe in, and you cannot indulge on this unnecessary thing. Lastly, is there is no compromises, right? Because champagne activism is a poison that kills off all young activists. This is the fruit of the devil because they're living the life of the elite. The only experience that they relate to is the elite, and they only can. The only way for you to be motivated enough is if you're living the same way as the masses. We think that we should be valued higher than both the opening debate because we actually talk about the people and real changes. So proud to oppose.
All right, I thank the government with that fine speech. To continue the case of closing up as well as closing this debate, I would like to invite the opposition whip.
Hello everyone, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, I don't have a preferred gender pronoun. My POI preferred method would be to use the chat box. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. It's a shame that closing government seems to not want to engage more or less with closing opposition's case, but I'll make sure to highlight that again in my speech, right? But I think just based off of that alone, I think closing government is already not coming off very strong in this debate, right? But let's take some of their arguments and why that is that wouldn't win this debate. First of all, they talk about actors, right? How we need to appeal to some of these people and how we antagonizing them wouldn't help. First of all, we are talking about people. I think Christopher Lee is basically talking about people who owns a yacht and want to convert into a socialist, right? Whereas we're actually talking about Champagne Socialists, and it's pretty weird to think of those people as someone that we want to convert if they're already proudly socialist, right? But if what they're essentially talking about is that we want to gain progress by moving the hearts of the rich, we think that this is something that is very counterproductive, right? Because their opinions are not very core to the movement. So there's no need to appease them when most of our movement are based off of people's votes and of people's fundings as well, right? Because in the end of the day, what will happen when we join the Met Gala and rub shoulders with them? And then we say that, okay, we're going to increase tax, right? I mean, sure, they will smile with you and then rub shoulders, and then they will look for the tax haven, right? And they're already doing that even with the Biden tax plan, finding loopholes in order to save their money. I mean, niceties in this type of events are niceties, right? But we're talking about money here, baby. They just contact their financial manager and get them to work. That's it. No progress at all. But second of all, their biggest point here is that it distracts people from choosing candidates because you are dealing with basically this persona, whether or not you're a true socialist or not. But we think that no, this will be good. And we think that this is exactly what is important in choosing candidates, right? Because currently, if we see like the leftist movement within the US, a lot of their inspiring leaders are actually like great personalities, right? This is what fueled the fire of the fight against the government, because these are people who looks like your neighbor and not someone who walks the Met Gala, ladies and gentlemen. And that is why they're already so tired of seeing champagne washed politicians, that this is something that is so fresh and so inspiring to them, and this will lead the movement to greater lengths more than what any champagne washed politician will do, right? And that is why becoming like still like the poor brown woman persona, like becoming like Ilhan Omar, or a very simple old guy like Bernie Sanders, goes a long way when it comes to this kind of policies. And that's why we think that but off of this alone, CG's case is already very weak. But let's see what OG has to offer in this debate, right? They say that there's complex motivations, and this could be part of an basically like an essential campaign, right? First of all, just because there's like complex motivations doesn't mean that we should take it for granted. Okay, it's complex, we shouldn't judge them at all. It's our job to ask them what is the purpose of this and antagonize them if there's basically no reason at all why they should do certain things, right? And did it work? We don't think so, right? Because who are you trying to appease by going to the Met Gala? Even Sachio himself agrees that there's only a small portion of people who watch or like basically cares about the Met Gala. So this is a bit confusing, right? From side opening government. But second of all, we think that currently with like leftist movement in the US still relies a lot on grassroots fight, right? And that is why it's incredibly weird. And we're not talking about consistencies that CEG was talking about. We're talking about like people losing sympathy over the Democratic Party, right? Because what if in the next election, Bernie will again show up in your screen television and say like, I am once again asking for your financial support, whereas your representative is walking the Met Gala with an expensive designer clothes, right? It's not inconsistencies. It's like mind-boggling. How come this could be part of the exact same movement, right? And we say that our fight is still long, and there's so much to go against this, against the rich, that it's a doomsday scenario if we lose the sympathy of the people who donates towards Bernie Sanders or donates towards AOC. And this is why this is incredibly important. And this is not about like super woke just complaining about AOC going to the Met Gala. This is incredibly important to the movement itself. But let's again talk about the second thing that OG is proposing here, which is basically that this would be like a more inspiring agenda, right? We can take this notion, right? Because we don't want people to be inspired by this Champagne Socialist, right? Because we are so far from Marxist utopia. For us to like celebrate it now would be kind of delusional, because what are we celebrating now, right? There's so many people that still need our help that doesn't have basic necessities. It's weird for you to just like show to the world the abundance that you have. That is not a Marxist utopia, like that's the capitalism utopia. But the second thing is that even if they do get inspired, this is the wrong kind of inspirations, because what people will aspire to is to be like AOC, to rub shoulders with Kendall Jenner and like who else is in the Met Gala? And Lil Nas, for example. But this is not the kind of notion that we want to give like young politicians or young activists, that you will one day be in the same red carpet as AOC, right? Because one day, these people that is super rich will become your enemy. When each time you try to close a loophole, when you're trying to increase the tax, these people are the same people who will try to evade your policies. And that's why it's simply like a nonsense facade to keep up if you're essentially going to go against them in practically all of your policies, right? But let's remind ourselves again of what CO brings to this debate. We talk about solidarity, the removing the kind of ideal image of what a socialist should look like, right? We're not supposed to be cultured and able to drink champagne with the rest of the people, right? And this is what differentiates us from opening opposition, right? Because we're talking about internal friction, which the internal invalidation of certain types of leftist or activist movement that can severely hamper the movement to begin with, whereas OO focuses on like external perception, right? Which we think that might still happen if Republicans will still strawman our ideas anyway. But we think that in the end of the day, since whatever the Champagne Socialists is doing is not helping socialist agenda, we think that it is okay for us to antagonize our comrades' actions, even if it leads them to have lower popularity. But in the end of the day, we can still see or like forgive them when they are actually making significant changes or actions or policies, right? We think that this is an incredibly small trade-off that we can make. We're very proud to oppose.
All right, I thank the opposition whip for the fine speech. That also concludes this grand final of DIPO Open 2021. Yeah, thanks everyone. And for the judges, I guess will be assigned